All right, here's the quick video I wanted to give you since we had a really interesting conversation in class today that I didn't want to end. All right, so this is the standard, and these are the basic. You're going to get basic problems like this, okay? So we were taking things, an equation like this, 2x squared equals 8, and we were setting them equal to 0, and we were factoring them. Well, that's not the only way you could do it. We can also use radicals to do this. And in order to, what we can do here is we want to make it, we want to take square roots. And the first thing I'm going to do here is I want to try to get a perfect square for x, right? So get x by itself, because I want to know what x is. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to take 2x squared equals 8, and I'm going to divide it by 2. And I'm going to get x squared is equal to 4. Okay, and the idea here is to get x squared by itself. Now, it was nice that 8 was even and that I was able to divide it by 2, but let's say this was 3 and this was 8. I would have divided by 3 anyway, okay? Just so that I get x squared by itself. Even if this side isn't a perfect square and is not all friendly like this right here, that's what I would do. Then all I'm going to do is take x squared, and I'm going to take the square root. And if you remember, I want you to practice using this square root symbol, okay? Like showing the step from x squared equals 4 to taking the square root. And what's the square root of x squared? Well, that's x. And what's the square root of 4? Well, that's 2. Now, if you'll remember from last year, this actually is plus or minus 2. And I'm going to show you another way how you might do this and see that it makes sense. From a different method that we've used. All right, so let's say I have 2x squared minus 8. Let's pull 2 out of it, right? So I'm going to do 2x squared minus 4, right? And so what I'm going to do is factor this, okay? And from here, I'm going to go ahead and set this x squared minus 4. I can ignore this 2, right? Because what I really should have done is just divided the whole thing by 2 and get x squared minus 4. So in fact, let's just do that. Divide everything by 2, I get x squared minus 4 is equal to 0. Okay, and now this is a difference of perfect squares. So I have x minus 2, x plus 2 equals 0, and this is going to give me x is equal to plus or minus 2. Okay, and you'll see these two match. This method here is what I want you to practice, though. Okay, that's what we're practicing right now. So here's another one. Go ahead, you can try solving this real quick. Okay, so I'm looking at this, and the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to solve this like an equation, right? So not factoring. So I'm going to get my variables on one side and my constant terms on the other. So that means subtracting 12 from both sides. I get 5x squared is equal to negative 20. Then I'm going to divide both sides by 5, and I get x squared is equal to negative 4. And then I'm going to take the square root of this, and I get, what's the square root of x? Well, that's x, or the square root of x squared is x, and the square root of negative 4 is, wait, I can't take the square root of negative 4. I can't take the square root of any negative number because no number multiplied by itself will give me a negative, right? If I try to put negative 2 times negative 2 is positive 4, not negative 4. So that doesn't work, and positive 2 doesn't work. So this one would be no solution, okay? Now, you can imagine what this might have been if it was 5x squared minus 12 is equal to positive 8. I'd get 5x squared is equal to 20. I would divide by 5, and I would get x squared is equal to 4. I would take the square root of both sides, and I would get x is equal to plus or minus 2. Okay, but that's a little bit different. Okay, so just remember a square root of a negative number is not possible, at least for now. Okay, it's not going to give you a real number solution, and right now we're looking for real number solutions. Okay, this is the last one. Here's the same idea. Now, I'm going to show you two different ways of doing this, but let's pretend that this said m squared is equal to 36, right? And so the idea is, since this is a perfect square and I want to know what m is, I can take the square root and I would get m is equal to plus or minus 6, okay? Well, what I want you to do is, if you think about this, right, like this here, oh, I messed this up. Hold on. That's not supposed to look like that. That squared is supposed to be on the outside of the parentheses. So let's fix that real quick. X, and then I want this whole thing to be squared. Okay, there we go. Ta-da! Okay, so let's pretend that this, right? Pretend that this thing, no, not that. Pretend that this right here is m. So again, m squared. So this thing, this thing here is being squared. So let's go ahead and let's just take the square root, okay? Because this is a perfect square. So I'm going to take the square root of this and the square root of that, and I get x minus 4 equals plus or minus 6. Okay, now this is where it gets a little confusing. So what I'm looking for is, when does x minus 4 equal positive 6? And when does x minus 4 equal negative 6? Okay, well, let's do this. We'll add 4 to both sides, so I get 10. And I'll add 4 to both sides, and I get negative 2. And those are my two answers. And those are the two, so if you graph it, they would cross the x-axis at 10 and at also at negative 2. Now, I'm just going to real quick show you if I took x minus 4, and let's say I solved this by factoring. I'm going to multiply this out. So I get x squared minus 8x plus 16 is equal to 36. Then I'm going to set this thing equal to 0. So I get x squared minus 8x minus 20 is equal to 0. And then what I'm going to look for is what two factors of here are 8 away from each other. Well, this would factor to x minus 10, and x plus 2 is equal to 0, so x would be equal to 10, and x would be equal to negative 2, which is the same thing that I have here, okay? Which that it should happen. It's the same solutions, okay? And if you take these in here, if you do 10 minus 4 is 6, 6 squared is 36, and if I do negative 2 minus 4 is negative 6, negative 6 squared is 36, and they both work, okay? That should be everything you need to do. Sorry, 2 minutes over my time allotment, but here are the questions. So go ahead, do those. I will check them in tomorrow.